She was not respected in her family of magicians because she had no strength. Her father decided to sacrifice the girl to the water stone, but her strength finally awakens in her. Now she has a chance to prove herself, but her jealous brother decided to get rid of her competitor. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and like if you like my videos. A stranger named Liart Elheim knelt in front of a large palace, from which a voice said, "Lift your head." The girl picked it up without hesitation, as if by reflex. In front of her, the girl saw an older man with a cane in his hand, who said, "Unlike your twin brother Leon, you were unable to awaken the power of water until you were 20. It was her father, a duke, who now wanted to kill his daughter according to the rules of ancient manuscripts to strengthen the power of the stone responsible for water power. Everyone was convinced that Liarte's brother Leon had a connection to a water stone that would give him power when he came of age. However, it seems that the stone had problems that it did not want to give into, so the father decided to sacrifice his daughter. Oh God, the girl was only thinking about how she had managed to get to this point in her life. And why did the stone choose her brother over her? A disgrace to the duchy, a creature that no one loves no matter how much she wants to, Liarta had very low self-esteem, as she was convinced that she was incapable of anything and was not needed by anyone. The Duke ordered the ritual of sacrifice to begin right away. Around Liarta, several wizards gathered and began to create a water circle that slowly flowed into the runes and symbols of ancient records. She wanted to be needed so badly, wanted to be loved, but it was all in vain, because in a few seconds she would just be ash on the ground, helping her brother awaken the power of water. Suddenly, the stone began to crack, and the magic pollen began to swirl around the girl like a fairy from a cartoon. Everyone turned their heads in surprise, their eyes fixed on Liarta, who already had one foot in the other world. The stone began to emit light, so bright that it began to blind his eyes. The sorceresses could not understand what was happening, and anyone who tried to stop it could get hurt. Their power was not enough to restrain the awakening of the force. So the next second, this fragile and unyielding stone cracked like a Christmas tree ornament. Calm, Liart felt her body fill with power, the water passing through her skin to her heart, fully allowing her to feel the power of the water. However, she could not wake up anymore. Her body fell to the bottom of the ocean, so deep and dark, it hid so many secrets. Was it death? That's how people feel when they die? Will Liarta die after receiving the power? Suddenly, she heard a voice say, "Open your eyes!" Looking up, she saw a light that blinded her, forcing her to squint. The stranger stretched out his hand. There was a sphere of water around him, and the guy looked like a god. Was he a water spirit? Was he trying to save the girl? To be honest, it just looked like a bad dream. The next second, she opened her eyes, feeling the earth's gravity again, and Liart realized that she seemed to have come back to life, saved by the spirit of the water. His frightened face will always be remembered in her mind. When Liart looked around the room, she recognized the familiar walls. It was her own room, but on the day of the sacrifice, this room was burned down. So what happened? Liart said, "I don't understand anything. Was it a dream or something else?" How did she survive? After all, the sorceresses couldn't have made a mistake or cheated, and her father was ready to do anything to keep the stone intact for Liarte's brother, but something seems to have gone wrong. Leon came into the room, his face so defiant and arrogant that she seemed to hate him already. Looking at him, the girl said, "Leonricius, why are you here?" Her voice carried loudly through the room. Liart couldn't stand her insolent brother, who had become unbearable. He said, "Why am I here?" "Of course, to visit you." It sounded as hypocritical as possible for a second. Leon grabbed his sister's hand, but she did not react. Even an indifferent look did not stop him, because he did not care about his sister or how she felt. Another parade of hypocrisy? Why was Liarta not surprised? Leon said, "You've ruined all my plans. You're pissing me off." Finally, the brazen man showed his face, because Liart wondered for a second if it was really her brother sitting in front of her. However, something was wrong. Something was wrong. A strange feeling of worry that squeezed my heart and made my whole body tremble. The girl recalled how 3 years ago she defended her brother Leonricius from hired killers, but unfortunately she was wounded, and all of Leon's business had to be postponed. Wait, it's like 3 years ago. Liarte remembered this day. It had already happened. If so, then it looks like she had gone back in time. If she had really gone back 3 years, it made the situation easier. The girl pulled her hand out of her brother's grip and said, "You piss me off too, Leonricius Ilheim. Don't worry. Next time I won't act so thoughtlessly." At first, he didn't understand what she meant. Reality seemed to be confusing. It was hard to understand what stage the girl was at, what she had already done, and what she hadn't. So it was worthwhile to figure it all out. Suddenly, the door to the room opened sharply. Someone ran into the room, shouting, "Lian, come quickly, follow me!" A stranger named Ayan said, "Father has called the awakened ones, and the water spirit stone has begun to shine brighter. You should look at it." They both left the room, and the stranger Ayn exchanged glances with Liarta. It seems she was not happy to see him on her doorstep either. Or was it something else? We should definitely look into it. At the moment of the sacrifice, the stone split like fragile glass, and then energy began to penetrate Liarti's body, energy of such power that she could not even imagine. Did she really awaken the power of water? If so, why did she return to the past? Why couldn't she do it earlier, and why did she die if she could regenerate? One way or another, it was worth trying now to see if she had this power, because if she didn't, it could all really be just a dream. But suddenly, a clot of energy appeared in her hands. It was water. The power of water had really awakened in Liart. She could now control it, and she was considered a water awakening. But it also had grave consequences that she was soon to face. The girl was overwhelmed with happiness. She felt proud of herself, and she was able to correct the mistakes of the past that did not allow her to live a long and peaceful life without her parents. Liarte didn't know if this was a blessing or a curse, but the only thing she knew for sure was that she would soon leave the ducal palace of Ilhai and live her life on her own. All this time, the girl suffered because she felt unwanted. Even among her closest people, no one wanted her, so her heart was filled with anger and despair, which could later become a problem. Liarte must leave this estate. When she comes of age, she will be able to control the force on her own. Somewhere far away in the woods, a carriage was traveling. It was small, but quite comfortable and beautiful. Someone asked, "Younger sir, how are your eyes?" With a smile on his face, the man replied, "They still don't see anything, strangely enough." A well-dressed stranger sitting across from the younger man said, "Elheim is sure that Burs is behind the killing spree that took place 2 days ago. Do you think they will lift the curse on you?" The younger gentleman knew that he could not trust the Elkai family because they were enemies and did not often have a friendly conversation over a cup of tea. So there are no other options. Either the curse will be broken by a water awakener, or if the younger gentleman is refused help, he will gather dirt on the Elheim family. The stranger looked out the window and said, "I think the imperial family sent you a gift," and was ordered to send it back because emperors always do that. But what happens if there really is a person who can break the curse? This person will get everything you want: money, fame, protection, anything you can imagine. The Burs family had a motto: kill the enemy and restore justice. He took off the blindfold and folded it neatly in his hands. The younger gentleman always had a clear plan, and murder was not something strange to him. Very soon they reached the Elheim estate, which they entered very soon, knowing where to go and what to do. Entering the Duke's hall, Father Elheim asked, "Michael Bersha, what brings you here?" It was quite brazen to barge into the Duke's hall without warning, but the Duke could do nothing about it because it was beyond his power. However, Michael said, "I have a proposition for you, so if you are surprised by my visit, you can send me back right now, and of course I have official permission to visit your estate." The letter in his hands was painfully familiar, heavy artillery for the Duke and the emperors of other lands. What kind of letter is this? A document that stipulates that a person who comes and does no harm to the family, whoever has such a letter, has no right to be expelled, because the document is signed by the emperor and the temple. Well, the Duke wanted it all to be a lie, because he was not happy that Michael Birsch was wandering around his estate. Suddenly, Michael said, "Why do you have this expression on your face, as if you are afraid of the power of the Bircha family?" This was just adding fuel to the fire, because their relationship had not worked out from the very beginning. And then there was the ridicule from the younger gentleman, but the Duke had no choice but to listen to the man. Mikkel said, "I am completely blind. Even the saints cannot break this curse. If there is a water awakened who can break this curse, I would like to ask him for help." The Duke replied, "It will be a little difficult, because whoever decides to remove the curse from you may leave his own life there. It is better to give the right of choice than to force someone." The Duke set a deadline of 1 month, which should have been enough time to find a volunteer who could break the curse, because it was a very responsible job that could take a life. Mikkel was ready to wait, so he agreed to Herzog's peculiar offer, as he had nothing to lose anyway. Mikkel quickly left the room and walked toward the exit. His assistant quickly followed him and asked, "Elheim said he would break the curse?" Okay, it was quite expected that Herzog would refuse to help Michael. The man said, No, and that was expected. I doubt whether there is an awakened person in the world who could lift the curse from me. However, he didn't know that there was a girl in the world who was preparing to come to him and help him. The starry sky fascinated many who paid attention to it. The clear edging of the stars was incredible. One of the subjects, named Valto Michaela, looked outside the window to see if anyone was coming, but there was no one. The guy said, "Anyway, there's not even an ant on the horizonite. Not even the servants came to volunteer. So you're going to stay here? Elheim has just gathered all those who have awakened. Maybe we should check it out." Mikkel just sat indifferently in his chair, looking as if he didn't care about anything. Life, servants, curses, and everything else. However, even without eyes, his irresistible beauty was visible to everyone. No girl could resist Michael, because his style, smell, power, and voice were so attractive that women lost their minds. However, it seems we were getting off topic, Michael said. "Did you gather all the guests? That's the reason to visit him. Thank you for this opportunity." The man continued, "Valta, since it's such a big deal, go to the duchy and gather information about Elheim." Without further ado, Valto agreed to carry out the order. Mikhail stayed in the room. He couldn't see his room as it is now, but he remembered some of the elements that were there before he lost his sight, like the curtains, the lamps, and the blue sofa. Over time, the hope that he would be able to regain his sight faded, as there are fewer and fewer people who have the ability to control water. This is a problem. If you ask me why, I will answer that Michael still had his power and felt it. But with blindness, control over it was lost quite quickly, and in the worst case, the ability to master the full potential of the power could disappear. This could not but disappoint the man, as sometimes it did anything that blindness took away from him. Suddenly, he heard a dull sound, as if someone had snuck into his estate. However, who dared to approach him, because Bursa's reputation left much to be desired. The man went out to the balcony and heard a stranger creeping along the tiles, trying to gently approach the man's room. Michael asked, "I don't like uninvited guests. Who are you?" Liart was a little nervous, because it was a very risky step to take, but she answered, "I am not an assassin, and certainly not a water awakened sent by Duke Elheim." As she spoke, Mikhail could smell her. For the boy, it was not the stench of the rotten water of Elheim. It was the pure and enchanting scent of the ocean, so fresh and light, it was incredible. Even if the boy could not see anything, his sense of smell clearly picked up the scent. She knew that the man could not see her, so she carefully took off her cloak and turned to him. Michael asked, "Okay, how did you find me?" However, the girl did not answer. She seemed to ignore him and said, "Michael Birch, I can help you break the curse if I can break it. What will you do for me?" A soft and light hand touched Michael's, and he felt the pleasant cold of the dark street envelop his hand, an unforgettable sensation. He didn't see Liart looking at him. It wasn't a look of love. She wasn't crazy about Mikhail. She had only come here to survive. The guy was speechless for a few seconds from such a sharp question. However, a smile suddenly appeared, which he slowly showed on his face, and then he took the girl's hand and kissed her. His graceful voice was incredibly pleasant. Michael said, "I'll do anything." This was enough for the girl to be sure of what she wanted to do. Squeezing his hand tighter, but not too hard, he repeated, "I'll do anything for you." They were enemies, but Michael didn't even think about it. Well, first of all, Liart should check on Mikhail's condition, because who knows what this terrible curse could have done to him. Birch said, "Do what you want. I have no reason to disagree with the person who can help me break the curse." First, Liart reached for the knot on the boy's head. Trying to gently untie it, his hands began to go numb because the knot was too tight. The guy replied, "I did it so I wouldn't have to call knights for help all the time." In fact, he could have untied the knot himself, but he didn't want to. He liked the pleasant coldness of the hands on his neck and the way the girl was running her hands through his hair. After the loss of vision, all other receptors became much sharper, including the sense of smell and hearing. Mikhail imagined the girl's scent as a rose in a garden, so light and pure, just like the ocean. However, Liarta looked him in the eye when she finally removed the bandage. Horrified by what she saw, the girl took a step back and hesitated whether to help him at all. What was imposed on the boy was called black magic, a heavy and very dangerous force that not everyone could withstand, because dark magic could also kill its owner. This curse is distinguished by the fact that it has 7 seals. It surrounds Mikhail's eyes, making the situation worse with each seal, so it was very difficult to overcome such a powerful force. Mikhail said, "How can a man from the Elheim family know such things, since the Duke hates ancient black magic? In fact, Books and any sources that recorded the history of ancient black magic were tried to be hidden or destroyed. However, this did not protect Liarta from curiosity. She read forbidden literature to help her family until she had the strength, a period when she had hope in her heart that she would receive her father's love. However, these are difficult times that she would rather not remember, so she said, "If you don't act now, you may lose your sight forever. I will try to remove one seal." The hand slowly began to draw an oval around the boy's face, and the girl drew a figure made up of water drops. It was a surprise that she was able to take such an important step after using force for the first time. Mikkel felt his body filled with power, his strength was restored, and the thought that this stranger from Elheim had such strength was simply amazing. It was over soon enough. Mikkel felt that his eyes did not hurt as much as they used to, so could the witch really help? Liarta said that she would remove one seal a day, because Mikkel is weak because of the curse, and may not be able to handle knowing all 7 seals at once. This fateful meeting will always remain in Michael's memory. He was looking forward to meeting the stranger. They said goodbye, holding the bandage in his hands, which still smelled of the fresh scent of roses. For some reason, it attracted me, drew me in, and beckoned me. In Liarta's past life, almost half of Elheim was plunged into war, all because of Mikkel Birsche. The Duke found himself in a difficult situation, but he confessed to everything he had done before, and because the curse was ridiculed by the Birchers, he decided to take revenge. The memory of his father shouting, "Liart, your death will awaken the Spirit Stone and provide strength to my son. Then we will be able to resist Birche." The simple true owner of the stone is Nenlian. Liarte is the true owner of the Waterstone, and the wielder of the most powerful power in all of Elheim. If only they had known, they would never have sacrificed her then. According to the rules, a minor is awakened, belongs to the family until he or she comes of age, and then has the right to choose where to live on his or her own. All we had to do was keep it a secret. Her brother Leon suddenly came into the room saying, "I came to check on the aftermath of the attack. How are you feeling?" The girl threw back her hair and said with a bit of arrogance, "What do you care?" "Okay." This surprised Leon, because he didn't expect such brazen behavior from his sister. He didn't understand what was going on. However, he clenched his fist and said with a sweet voice, "Your health is more important to me than anything else." The old script, Leon always tried to make himself look like a loving brother, but he was so hypocritical that it seemed he was doing a pretty bad job of hiding it. Liart said, "Oh, so you're worried that you won't be able to fully utilize the power of water, are you?" No matter how bitter it is to admit it, the girl was right, because without her, the stone will not live, and without the stone, there is no power. One way or another, Liart was allowed to move around the estate during the day, and she was also supposed to go outdoors to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Leon quickly left the room without waiting for a response. He knew that his sister had changed radically. From the moment she protected him from the killers, something changed in her mood. More arrogance and indifference to the world than usual. It was frightening. Leon didn't want to stand for it, because it only hurt everyone. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by his older brother Ainlius, who said, "Leon, there you are. The stone has started to shine brighter. I think you should take a look at it." They both went down to the hall in the middle of which the stone was located without any questions. He really shone very brightly, as if he was about to explode from so much energy. Leon asked, "How long has he been shining like that?" And his brother replied that since he was a baby. The boy slowly approached the stone and touched it. However, he did not feel any force, although his body always seemed to be covered by a strong shell of water, so light and calm, but at the same time elastic and flexible. Suddenly, Leon said, "Is this stone responding to me for sure?" And then a doubt, so terrible and strong that his heart began to pound, was sown in his head. Night quickly fell outside, which meant that Liart was ready to come to see Michael again. She quickly entered his room, knowing that the boy had sensed her from a kilometer away. He was waiting for her. He knew she was coming, so he was happy to see her. Liarte quietly said, "Hello, Mikkel Birsche." She slowly walked forward, assessing Mikkel's condition. He seemed to be feeling quite well by the smile. Mikkel said, "Aren't you tired of calling me that?" But Liarte didn't understand what was wrong. The man said that the girl should call him by his first name. Liarte said, "Okay, Michael." Oh my God, this girl was not embarrassed at all. It seems she was not interested in talking to him at all. But Michael saw it as coolness or intelligence. Well, Liarte didn't take long and began to remove another seal. And just like the first time, Mikhail's body was shaken almost to the bone by an incredible force, so powerful that the man trembled. Liart looked at it and realized that something was going wrong. She quickly stopped and took the boy's hand, trying to calm him down. He quietly said, "Don't worry, you have to believe me. I will definitely give you your sight back." Why was her voice so magical? It was as if she was a guardian angel, descending from the clouds like a blessing, trying to help Michael, who seemed to be losing his mind. Mikhail thought to himself, "Her hands are so soft and delicate, and she's small enough that I can wrap my arms around her body, and she's trying to calm me down. It's funny that Birch would say something like that. Who would have thought?" He had no choice, so he believed her. Liart was the first girl who interested him so much, he wanted to know more, to see her and talk to her. The girl continued to lift the curse gradually. Day after day, she worked tirelessly. At some point, she finished and said, "It looks like it's done. Did it hurt?" Mikhail smiled gently and said, "No, thanks to your concern." What was it that interested him so much about her? Liarta was very worried that Mikhail might have been hurt, because she hadn't had the power for that long, so she might have made a mistake, so she said so. However, the boy was not concerned with that. He was thinking how charming she was, because despite his status, she spoke to him as if he were a lamb she wanted to protect. The desire to see this girl with her own eyes grew with every minute of their conversation. When the girl turned away from him, Mikhail grabbed a thin strand of her hair and said, "I will repay you for your kindness when you break the curse. Will you tell me your name?" Liarta was surprised, because she was convinced that Mikhail had known everything about her for a long time. And anyway, this guy had a bad reputation but strong power. So it was expected that he would find out everything about her. But Michael knew nothing at all, and he had no plans to find out anything. The guy said, "I didn't plan to dig under you, but if the owner of the powerful water force is unknown to society, then there are reasons for that." Liarte realized that Mikhail was willing to wait as long as necessary to find out the information he needed, willing to wait until the girl began to trust him. It touched her soul, touched her so deeply that without expecting it, she thought about the situation for a long time. Liarte liked his concern, and as a sign of his tenderness towards her, she thought that she could tell him everything after she was done with the curse. The next day the weather was beautiful and clear. Since Liarte had the right to walk around the estate during the day, she decided to go to the library to get a book that could help explain some of the possibilities of water. However, it was surprising for the girl, because before the rebirth she'd only heard bad things about Birch, but in fact, he is much friendlier than he seems at first glance. Well, in any case, it was a good thing, because Liarte had a guarantee of help in the future. Soon enough, she reached the library. Walking between the councils, she could smell the old books and the dust that settled on the highest shelves, as well as the smell of cinnamon that usually accompanied her. This place was a continuous memory, because Liarte often hid here from her parents, who did not like the unawakened. But one day, it all came to an end. She stopped coming to the library when her father caught her reading, caught her, and severely punished her for it. We all understand how difficult it is to recall such moments, but we shouldn't have thought about it for too long. So why did we come here? The more seals Liarte broke, the more knowledge she had to have to control such a force. She found something interesting and wanted to take the book to read. Suddenly, she noticed one of her brothers, a shy, thin, and handsome boy, standing in the corner as if afraid of his sister. It was clear that he was worried. But what happened? This guy's name was Vyamin Elheim. Let's talk a little bit about Liarte's family ties. She has 3 older brothers, 5 in total. If you don't count Leon, then 4. The first and oldest brother is Einlius. The second brother is Tandarian, and the youngest is Vyamin. He and Vyamin were almost the same age, as they often played together as children. Many common interests allowed them not to sit in their rooms and get bored. They both loved to read and were quite active. But in one day, it was all destroyed. Why? I'll explain in a moment. One day, Vyamin found a book of forgotten knowledge, which was surprising for both of them, because they have always been drawn to the secret and unexplored. Vyamin began collecting forbidden books secretly from his father, and at first, Liarte didn't understand it, but she began to study black magic to help the family, but it didn't last long. One day, Liarte and Vyamin were in the library as usual, exploring a new book they had found on the dusty shelves. When my father saw this, he was very angry and asked, "Who dared to steal Elheim's books?" It seemed as if their hearts had skipped a beat, and it was probably one of the worst days of their lives. Vyamin tried to throw off his guilt, under pressure from his father, knowing that he would be severely punished for his actions. Vyamin pointed to his sister, and Liarte was shocked to realize that she had been betrayed by her own brother. For the girl, the whole world ceased to exist. The guy she trusted and was closest to simply handed her over like the last piece of trash. It was painful to realize how much fear had penetrated him to the very bone, that having swallowed all the promises, he had so brazenly blamed his sister. Of course, the father knew it was a lie. How could a little girl have the strength to steal forbidden books? However, he still punished Liatra. Instead of the usual punishments, the father decided to be creative and tortured his daughter with water. After that, Liarta could no longer communicate with her brother. In public, they would only look at each other. From time to time, they would talk about the weather and mood, but it always ended in ignoring or an awkward pause, after which someone would walk away. Yes, just like now. Viamin shyly approached his sister and asked, "Liart, it's been a long time, how are you?" The girl brazenly replied, "How dare you even make your face around me?" Of course, Viamin was speechless at the impudence of such insolence. Before the rebirth, Liarte felt pain for this situation. She was very afraid of Viamin, but now she was completely indifferent to him. Death changes people, doesn't it? My brother tried to start a conversation and held out his hand to greet her, but the girl ignored him and simply walked away with the words, "I don't have time for you, Viamin." The guy shakily replied, "I made a mistake when I was a kid, but I always wanted to apologize because I care about you." Liart stopped for a second, seeming to think about what her brother had said. But later she came back and said, "No, you think only of yourself, and you want to get rid of the guilt. I know you. I know you better than you think." She was enraged by Viamin's harshness, so she decided to finish him off so that he would not say another word in her direction. Slowly walking towards her brother, she said, "Aren't I right? You don't want to be a bad person in your father's eyes. That day you also decided to keep the status of a good child in front of the Duke, so you accused me." Viamin himself knew that his sister was completely right in every detail of what she said. Too much time had passed, and there was no point in apologizing anymore, because she would never think of forgiving him. Viamin tried to grab the girl's hand, but Liart just rejected him, so sharply that the guy almost fell to the floor. As she said goodbye, she said only a few words. "Keep being a good child hypocrite." That same evening, Liart packed her things and went to see Mikhail. Meanwhile, he was talking to Valto. "So, according to the results of the reconnaissance in a few days, the spirit stone in the Elheim estate has awakened. Is that all?" Valto answered in the affirmative. Mikhail asked for proof, but the mean man replied, "Young sir, I just saw and heard. How can I have proof? I almost died several times during the reconnaissance." Walto knew that despite his words, Michael was unlikely to believe him. However, the guy said, "It's okay, good job. Ask your father about the stone with a letter." "Okay." Valto was also speechless for a few seconds, because it looks like he was cursed out of his mind. The man asked, "Sir, you seem to be in a good mood." And Michael admitted that he was only happy because a magical stranger was about to come and lift the curse. Valto decided not to interfere, because it would only make things worse, so he left the room so that the girl would not be uncomfortable. It was late at night outside. Mikhail was waiting for her. However, she did not come, and other guests came instead. With a smile on his face, he quickly got up and tried to figure out who was in front of him. But then he said loudly, "How come? I wanted to sit in peace for at least a few days." A quick analysis made it clear that they were not Elheim's servants, so they were subjects of the one who cursed Michael's eyes. Well, the best way was to choose a dagger, because if you use magic, there is a risk that Elheim will suspect something, and if you use a gun, it will cause loud noises throughout the house. So it's better to do it quietly. The first blow was followed by all the others. Michael asked something, but received no answer. He was interested in why they came, what they needed, and what they were trying to do. Suddenly, Liater entered the mansion. Mikhail held the door and said, "This is a bit of a bad time. I'm sorry, but you should wait outside. I'm cleaning up a bit." However, something went wrong. The enemies just froze in place like stone statues. Liater used her power. The girl's gentle voice cut through the tense air. "Are you okay, Michael?" Removing the bandage, the man replied with a touch of flirtation. "How else? I thought I told you to wait outside, didn't I?" Liatre said she only wanted to help because Mikhail was in danger. Suddenly, she noticed a wound on his cheek and said, "You've been shot. I'll heal you when everything is better." Mikhail thought, even in a room full of the smell of blood, she cared about him and wanted to protect him. The girl's actions did not meet his expectations at all and made his heart beat 10 times faster. Thanks to Liatra, it will be easier to deal with bandits. Michael ordered the girl to stand behind him. Suddenly, the killers began to crumble like sand. Mikhail didn't notice, but Liatra quickly stopped him. However, the girl did not use force. It was something else, something much more frightening and difficult than the power of water. On the ground, there are only bones on the sand, the remains of an ancient world. Leader quickly ran over and began to examine the remains. It looks like it was also a curse, but usually the killers leave behind patterns and there are no letters or patterns. It looks like it was also black magic. Leader said, "I can't say for sure, but I don't feel magic here anymore." Obviously the threat had passed, but we had to understand what it was. Michael agreed to send the knights on a reconnaissance mission to find out more. Anyway, the time has come for the next seal. Mikhail blushed with shame, but he loved it to pieces. The girl gently wrapped her arms around the boy's neck and began the ritual. Mikhail thought, "She's already dealt with 2 seals. There's only 1 more to go. It would be nice if time stopped." It was already dark outside, but dawn was about to break. The crown prince said, "It's a pity they couldn't keep their shape. You'd better throw them away." This prince's name was Lucas Franz, a man of extraordinary beauty, so attractive that women could not help but pay attention to him. The servant asked, "What to do with the puppets sent to Elheim?" The prince ordered nothing to be done with them, because they were no longer needed. The prince said, "The dukes of Birscha and Elheim should start to suspect each other. It will not be easy for them to understand who is really behind this." However, there was one problem. Lucas did not know Mikhail's position in the Elheim estate, so it is likely that he could have started cooperating with the duke. Anyway, even if they became friends, it would be very difficult to break such a strong curse, so Lucas thought he had no reason to worry. Well, it was clear that it was the prince who had cast the spell on Michael and later tried to kill him several times. There was only one living soul in the duchy who could break this curse, Leonretius. At least that's what not only the prince thought, but only Liarte knows the truth. The prince wanted to prevent the boy from awakening his powers and prevent the curse from being lifted. But will he succeed in finding the truth? No one knows yet. Meanwhile, the duke gathered all his sons, including Leon, because the stone was about to awaken. Vieman sat quietly at the table, as if not listening to the stone at all. It was the same with Leon. He didn't know where Liart went, where to look for her, he asked the maids, but no one knew where she was. Suddenly, someone called out to him, drawing his attention. My father said, "You're coming of age soon, so you should find a wife." Okay, this news was shocking for Leon. Suddenly, the older brother pulled a letter out of his jacket pocket, and then he said, "Here's a letter from Prince Lucas. He wants to come for a visit. I think we can talk about your wedding to Princess Ninian." The guy was deeply indifferent to who decided to marry him, especially since Ninian was not a bad girl. At least her beauty definitely prevailed. They had known each other since childhood, and Leon knew that she liked him, and it was easy to be friends with Ninian. However, deep down, he knew that it was much easier with Liarta. But now she was completely different, so where had he gone wrong? His head spun with the thought that his sister might never speak to him again, or never come back at all. Discussions began at the table when the Duke planned to invite Prince Lucas. My father proudly replied, "The opening of the event in honor of the welcome of Mikhail Birka is coming soon, and we will invite a member of the imperial family. We will have a banquet at night and a hunt during the day." Time passed. Liardi had only 2 seals of the curse left to break, and every day she felt herself gaining strength, but it was not enough for the next time. It takes a lot of time now. But Michael didn't care. He would have sat there for ages. 2 layers remained to be removed, and now the guy could see very dimly, but he could distinguish colors and shapes, and the curse was really lifted. During a nighttime conversation, Valto asked, "If you can only see a little bit, wouldn't it be a problem to meet hired killers at a hunting competition?" Okay, it was clear to everyone that Elheim hated Birscha, but inviting a blind man to go hunting was too much. This duke was slowly crossing the line, by the way. It looked like it was even fun for Mikhail. Once upon a time, Mikhail knew he would destroy Elheim, but now it was just fun. Suddenly, the guy started to see more clearly. First, he opened his eyes, and then everything became a little clearer. When Liart got close enough for Mikhail to see her, he was speechless. His throat felt as if it had dried up, and all the words just flew out of his head. The girl said, "Michael, can you see me?" She was so close that it even embarrassed the boy a little, and he seemed to be about to burst into tears of shame. His trembling hands and voice could not help but attract attention. Realizing that his excitement was getting the better of him, he tried to quickly control himself and calm down. Taking a deep breath and exhaling, he said, "I'm glad I was able to see you right after the curse was lifted." As a sign of gratitude, he took her hand and kissed it, saying, "Birscha will never forget your deed. You gave me back my sight. The whole world will remember you as my savior." There was one more seal left, but Mikhail was sure that the girl would be able to remove it. Just as he had done at the first meeting, he did not go back on his word. The guy was ready to do anything to repay her for her concern. Liarte thought, all I want is for my past not to happen again. The only thing I have to do is not know if I can do it alone, and I'm not sure if Michael can help me. Well, through fear and anxiety, the girl began to speak. Putting her hand on her heart, she said, My name is Liarte Elheim. I want only one thing, to be free from the Elheim family. That's why I helped you. Well, all said and done, Michael promised to do anything, so he will do this too. Of course, it was not as easy or as fast as it might seem, but he definitely had much more power than Liarte, and the girl also knew that he was a man of honor who had to keep his word. They quickly went to the balcony together and started talking. As you know, I am Bursa's successor, the current head of the family, my father, and before that, my grandfather. Liarte didn't seem at all interested in talking to Michael. The guy noticed this and decided to ask her a little bit about the girl. But she just answered, I'm a Liarte. Michael looked at her in surprise, because he was curious about what she loved and hated. However, only now has she thought about what she loves and what she hates. Mikhail asked, Hey, do you like birds? But the girl could not give a clear answer. She knew almost nothing about herself, probably nothing at all, except that she was a water manager, and that her name was Liarte, and that was probably all. Suddenly she heard a strange sound spreading loudly around her. Mikhail picked up one bird and said, These are the birds Birsha uses to send letters. Do you like them? One of the birds even landed on the girl's shoulder and chirped. Oh my God, they were so cute. Liarte immediately reached out to pet the cute creature. Yes, it seems she liked birds too. Mikhail was glad that she had found something she liked. They started talking about escaping, and the guy said, So when are you planning to escape? If you want, we can leave right now. No one will see you again. Liarte replied, I'm a minor, so I can't leave my family. If I run away now, Elheim will capture me based on the laws of the Empire. If we're not careful, the whole Empire will turn against Birsha. Don't look at me like you don't see the problem. Mikhail knew that he would leave this place when the hunting competition was over, but he didn't want to leave Liarte here. But she couldn't leave with him either. Well, he found a solution and said, We have no other options. We will escape from Elheim on the day you come of age. A stranger stood in front of the gates of Elheim, enjoying the views of his home. Well, this is the middle brother Tandarion. He has been away for a long time. Only now he has arrived and tasted this pleasure of home. The door opened quickly, despite the fact that it was incredibly heavy and large. The eldest brother turned his head and saw Tandarion. Well, it looks like he was expected, but Tandarion was late, so he got his ass handed to him for that. The guy said, Wow, couldn't it have been my constantly busy brother? Where is the water spirit stone now? His sweet smile was just incredible, as if he was the only one of the three who was actually enjoying life, not sitting in a mansion going through boring papers. Well, this guy's quite creative, but he's different from all the awakened people in his family. He hates the achromatic color of the Elheim hair, so he dyes it this bright red. He also went to the palace to guard Ninian. The elder brother replied, The stone is where it has always been. If you are so interested, you should have come here as soon as you received the letter. Their conversation was the same as always, with Tandarion smiling and looking not responsible at all, and his brother running around like a dad, controlling everything. First, Tandarion went down to see the spirit stone. When he saw how brightly it was burning, he said, Wow, it's amazing. Why is it glowing so brightly? If I had known how serious it was, I would have definitely come earlier. However, the problem was that the stone did not glow so brightly before. Something was definitely wrong. Tandarion slowly reached out with his hand to the energy blob in the center of the room. The awakened Elheim family, even if they did not create the power of water on their own, can control it. This is called capture, but the power that filled the room was impossible to control. What was happening? Everything around them seemed to be pressing against the temples. Suddenly, the stone cracked, and the power it released was like a storm in the ocean, sweeping over the brothers. A spirit came out of the unknown smoke, a spirit Liatre had seen before when she was reborn. This little boy looked surprised, but definitely not afraid, his voice echoing through the room. Who are you? Where is the one who woke me up? This spirit flew up the mountain, as if it were going to destroy all life within a kilometer. No one realized who the guy was, and the stranger began to attack the Elheims with incredible force. They both knew perfectly well that no human could achieve such power. They said in chorus, Is this a monster, or is it the essence of God? Well, they answered their own question. Aeneas asked tremblingly, Who are you? However, the spirit got angry and said, I asked the question first, you impudent bastard. An incredible force poured over the brothers, so powerful that it knocked them down and then lifted them to the ceiling. squeezing their ribs. It was a completely different water, a completely different force. The spirit said, "I am the 10th weapon of Lord Ryard, the first subordinate of Jurin." What? What the hell? This guy was Urin's first contractor? The first owner of the stone? There are hundreds of stories and legends about Urin. Everyone knows his name. The boy said, "Yes, you usually call me the King of Spirits." Well, the Elheims were the ancient descendants of Urin, but their power was so weak that the spirit did not even try to squeeze information out of them. Aenleus felt the water's power weakening. The spirit said, "Ask you again, if you didn't understand the first time, where is the one who woke me up?" My God, my chest was burning so badly that I just wanted to run away from this place. But this spirit could actually kill them if it didn't get the information it wanted, because it wasn't even trying to harm them. It was just a game. Aenleus shouted, "He's not here! Bring him here!" The spirit thought about this question for a few minutes, and then said that it was not worth it. Elheim had orders to bring Urin's successor in 3 days. The spirit disappeared, and Tandarian said, "It looks like he fell asleep again after 3 days. That's the day after the banquet and hunting competition ended. Well, it was definitely worth telling my father." The Duke quickly hurried to the room with the stone, but the door would not open. He angrily said, "The door is closed, you idiots. One of you should have stayed there." But Tandarian said they would have been eaten if someone had stayed in that room with the Spirit King. Well, an order is an order. They had to bring Urin's successor in 3 days. Aenleus said, "If we come here with Leon, the door will definitely open." Suddenly, everyone realized that no one had seen him for a long time. Where is he? Well, Leon seems to have been running after Liart for the last few days. It was said that he even invited her to a hunting competition. The Duke didn't even mind if Liart went, because if Leon wanted to do it, it would be done. Now it was important to hide the fact that the Spirit King had awakened. Especially the Elheims did not want Birsha to know about it. The day of the competition came. Burs and Valto stood on the side and watched everything. Suddenly, the guy caught sight of Leon and Liart, but the girl didn't seem very happy to see him. She was obviously uncomfortable. Leon grabbed the girl's hand, and Michael saw it. Michael said, "I don't like this guy at all." Suddenly, the Duke came up behind me and said quietly, "How are you, Duke Birch?" It was like a parade of hypocrites, because they both hated each other to the core, but spoke kindly in front of people. Only one layer of the curse remains to be removed, as his eyes are almost healthy, and Mika will no longer have any problems with his vision. However, it would have been worth keeping this secret, and it's good that Elheim doesn't know about it, because this impudent man told us to just stand there and watch what was happening, the height of disrespect. His gaze abruptly shifted to Liarte and her brother, and Miko saw the boy grab the girl's hand again. Well, he had another mission. He had to fulfill it. Liarte ran away, sitting sadly under one of the trees somewhere on the edge of the forest, trying to hide from prying eyes. She thought, "Leon has been acting strangely lately. Suddenly he invited me to a competition. He never did that in his past life." Leon's expression was very annoying every time she mentioned him. My brother asked, "I will get you any cattle you want." It was a strange question, to be honest. Liart didn't even know who she could have wished for, but Leon grabbed her by the hand and shouted, "So think of one!" It was painful, so the girl let go of my hand and said, "Well then, a silver fox, but don't kill it." The boy turned pale as soon as he heard the animal he was supposed to find. But then a smile appeared on his face, so evil and hypocritical that the girl felt sick just thinking about it. Leon promised to keep his word. Although Liart had made a very difficult animal wish, hoping that he would not agree, he was able to surprise her. Before she was reborn, she wanted to hear these words so badly, but now she didn't care if he died. Suddenly, someone called out to the girl, and Liart quickly turned her head to see who it was. It was Mikkel. He quickly walked through the forest and sat down on the grass next to the girl. Liart asked, "How did you know I was here?" But the answer was not clear. Michael said that he just thought of this place and came here. Anyway, she didn't ask him any more questions. This answer suited her perfectly. Mikkel knew in his mind that he had found this place only by the wonderful aroma that reached all the way here. He laughed at his thoughts, but didn't think it would look strange. Anyway, Liarda didn't pay attention to it. She asked, "How are your eyes? Are they okay?" Mikhail said that everything was fine, but he was more concerned about the fact that there was a mark on his skin from Leon, a mark from when he grabbed Liarda's hand. The girl said, "Oh, it doesn't hurt. I'm used to it." Mikhail looked at her in surprise and said, "This is not normal. You shouldn't get used to this. I would be glad if you didn't get used to pain." It seemed to turn her world upside down, as if everything ceased to exist. Did it happen to everyone? Well, the Elheim family seems to be very strange. Liart didn't even know what to say in this situation, so she said, why did you come here? But Michael just smiled and said that he missed Liarta, because now he owed her. His wonderful smile was soothing. God, he was an incredible man. Had Liart begun to notice it too? She knew that other people only saw her as unawakened, and Mikkel was even looking for her in the middle of such a large forest. He was really worried about her. Liart shyly tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and said, I'm glad you came. My God, those words were so tender and sensitive, as if they could forget something so deep in Michael that he himself had never known. Mixed feelings, shame and fear, attraction to Liatur, and the desire to kiss her right here and now and not let go of her. This awkwardness made Michael stand up and decide to leave. Looking at the girl, he asked, Will you be at the banquet tonight? He managed to change the subject, and Liatur wondered if she should leave. She recalled that Lian had also invited her to the banquet, so there was no point in refusing. Liatur said, Yes, if you come there too. Michael smiled gently and said that he would be waiting for them to meet, because he wanted to ask the girl to dance. When Liatur said she didn't know how to dance, Mikkel said, That's okay, I'll teach you. Meet me at Liatur's banquet. His shadow disappeared into the tall trees as quickly as it had appeared. Lian walked slowly through the forest, trying to find the fox his sister wished him to catch. At some point, a feather on the ground caught his attention, and Lian hurried to examine it. Well, it was definitely the fur of a silver fox. The boy recalled talking to his brothers. Ain said it didn't make any sense, and Tandarion started laughing. My father haughtily said, Oh, silver fox, you have chosen a very difficult prey, Lian. Are you sure you can handle it? However, the guy ignored the question. He was interested in everything about these foxes, how to lure, kill, overcome, and perhaps they have special preferences. My father said, I don't know much. This species was exterminated by order of our ancestor. Almost all of them died. However, Lian was now holding her fur, so one of them was definitely going to stay in this forest. His body was filled with enthusiasm, and the boy went to hunt the fox, which could not get far. However, it was also important to catch the fox alive, which makes hunting more difficult. However, Lian was ready to do anything to make Liarti the same as before, sincere and kind, always ready to help, and eager for attention. Suddenly, Lian heard a sound characteristic of a fox. He quickly ran behind the bushes, hoping to find a fox there. And I found it. An incredibly beautiful silver fox was walking along the path in search of food. Its neat muzzle was so beautiful that it was even a pity to harm this fox. Nevertheless, it was worth catching it, and the boy slowly began to approach the fox, stretching out his hand to grab its fur. But suddenly a loud shot rang out, and everyone got scared, including the fox and Lian, because there was definitely someone else in the forest. The animal fell to the ground. Was it killed? It looks like it. However, when Lian got closer, he noticed that she had only fainted from fright. Suddenly, Birch came out from behind the bushes, gently approached the fox and lifted it off the ground, and then headed toward Lian. Aelheim was incredibly annoyed that Bersha had stolen his fox, but it was hunting anyway, and Lian had nothing to say that was reasoned. Mikkel said, Well, as you can see, Lianricius Aelheim, your skills are not enough to hunt such a fox. Even I did better. It was insulting to hear such things about himself, because blind Mikkel could have outrun him, of course, not without tricks, but Lian was not supposed to know about it. Mikkel walked forward and said, Next time you should think ahead. You never know when something will be taken away from you again. Was it a hint or a direct threat? Either way, Michael didn't care, because he knew he was keeping his promise, no matter what it cost him. Liart sat in her room, grieving alone. Lian brought a dress for her to the banquet, but the girl didn't even want to open it. In her past life, she had no festive clothes at all, and it seemed as if this dress was a luxury she could not afford. After the rebirth, a lot of things changed, so much so that Liart had to get used to the new reality for quite a while. This has never happened before, so why has the future changed so dramatically? Liarte opened the box. Curiosity got the better of her, and she looked at what was inside. She said, Nice, if I had received it in my past life, would I have liked it? Only now did she notice that she had ugly hair, an old gray dress, and a strange expression on her face. In her past life, she wouldn't have even paid attention to it, because it had always been like that, and Liart once thought it would continue to be like that. But now, for her own sake, for the sake of her best version, she was ready to write a new future, the one she wanted, and the one she would love. Not the girl who grew up in Elheim. The feast is about to begin. Ninian arrived at the estate, wearing a luxurious and expensive dress, her hair flying in the wind and looking flawless, as did her evening makeup. When she noticed Leon, she immediately shouted his name and started waving her hand to get his attention. Like a little child, she happily ran up to him and grabbed his hand and said, "We haven't seen you for so long." Despite Ninian's childish reaction, Leon was quite reserved and calm. When the prince got out of the carriage, Liang said, "Thank you for your visit, Your Majesty, the prince's successor." Well, the feast began. Everyone was laughing and dancing. There was a lot of food and drink. And Ninian was still standing next to her fiancé, as if she could not imagine her life without him. 3 brothers, Ayn, Viamin, and Tandarian, were walking through the hall and said, "Oh, princess, she didn't even say hello and stuck to Leon, too bad." When the princess saw her bodyguard, she shouted that his outfit sucked, but they both just laughed at it. Ayn approached the prince and greeted him, and Lucas did the same in return. The conversation turned from gifts and gratitude to the topic of the competition. Ayn looked nervously in the direction of the prince and said, "Ah, the competition. It's already over." Ayn is not good at hiding secrets, and something did happen, because his expression clearly indicated a strange situation there. By the way, where is Bircha? After a quick look around the room, Lucas found what he was looking for. Well, Miko was still wearing the bandage, so the prince didn't worry about it at all. Perhaps the curse was the only thing that had bothered Prince until then. However, a few seconds later, Ninian came running in and said, "Brother, what are you thinking about?" Lucas joked and said that he was sorry to marry off his own sister, but something was wrong. The sister pulled Lucas by the ear and said that Leon was in no mood today, as if he was focused on something else, or someone. Ninian said, "When I asked if his sister was coming, he just went blank. She looks a lot like him, just as beautiful." Lucas knew that Duke Elheim hated his daughter because she was so much like her brother, but not awakened. Poor Ninian, you don't even know why they hate her so much. Suddenly, I noticed that the whole room opened its eyes in surprise. A woman wearing snow-white gloves was slowly descending the stairs. Of course, it was Leader. She looked just incredible. Probably the first time in her life she wore something so beautiful and exquisite. Her makeup and hair were done in a special way, and Leader looked very much like a woman. All members of Leatre's family remembered her mother as a bright woman who loved the color purple. Before she died, she wore the dress Leatre was wearing for the last time and had a similar hairstyle and a purple bow in her hair, just like her mother. Ninian opened her mouth, looking at Leatre as if she were a Greek goddess. Her delight could not be expressed in words or explained. It was something so perfect and romantic that it seemed impossible. Viamin quietly said, "This is the first time I've seen Liarte in a dress like that." Of course, her clothes, hairstyle, and behavior were impeccable. She resembled an aristocrat, the daughter of a respectable gentleman who owned an entire empire. Leon looked at his sister without admiration, like everyone else. He still didn't think Liarte was worth even a sliver of his attention, so why were you so desperate to chase her? Liarte always wanted love, always begged to play with her, to talk to her, and the more she wanted to join the family, the funnier Liana was. He didn't want to see her, didn't want to talk to her. Everyone in the family was against this child, so why should he be friends with her? The only thing they had in common was that they were brother and sister, but that's all. However, when Leon came closer, he saw Liarte look at him and mentally say, "But why are you looking at me like that? With those cold eyes? With that indifferent look?" However, while Leon was thinking, Michael quickly sprang into action. Leon just wanted to say something, but it didn't go according to plan. Birch came closer and said, "Would you like to dance with me, Liarte?" Leon clearly noticed his gaze. Even though his eyes were closed, you could still feel how persistent he was. That meeting in the woods when Michael said, "You should think ahead. You never know when something will be taken away from you again." It just flashed into Liana's mind, like a painful blow to the head. There was a last hope that Liarte would refuse, push him away, but she extended her hand to him and agreed to dance with Michael. Coming even closer to him, she put her arms around his waist and said, "Yes, I would love to." It was a shock, her happy and joy-filled look now belonging to Michael. But why? "Liarte, can you hear me?" "Liarte?" Leon realized that he was now losing his sister. As sad as it was, he was losing her attention. Liarte was dancing with Mikhail and felt as alive as she had ever been in her life, and the boy quietly said, "I used to like this song, by the way. You're very beautiful today." The girl said the same in response, but turned her head to the side. There stood the prince, watching Michael very closely. The imperial family used to have wide access to books about black magic, death, and various potions. The murderers who came to the banquet last time left Mikhail unable to see, and they obtained the powder that was later slipped into the boy's drink. When the assassins are crushed to pieces, they are left with only bones and dust. all of which is an ancient power that cannot be used without being a member of the imperial family. So the imperial family was behind it all, and Liart quickly realized this. Looking up at the boy, she said, "Mikhail, can you dance so openly? After all, the culprit of your curse is in the hall." Well, this girl was much smarter than she seemed at first glance, so charming and intelligent that it seemed there was no one better than her. Mikhail had planned to talk about it later, but it seemed there was no need, so he said, "I don't care. They're sure I don't see anything." He gently twirled the girl in his arms and tilted her over, holding her by the waist. And then he said, "Instead, when you reach the age of majority, come to Burke. Come with me." It was hard to watch, I admit. It was quite unexpected, but perhaps impudent. Leon definitely thought this was insolence. What was he up to? Knowing that Liarta wants to escape from the Elheims more than anything else, the boy decided to take away this right from her, completely, because if he takes the place of his father, he can force Liarta to stay at the Elheim estate. Everyone was dancing, including Ninian and Lian, but her legs started to hurt, so she said, "Stop dancing, let's go. My brother and the Duke are talking about our wedding, isn't it exciting?" The girl looked into the future, noticing Lucas and Herzog's exchange of phrases, one after the other, and a smile appeared on her face. Lucas drank a little more of his drink and said, "Okay, I understand you, then I'll send you the wedding papers?" The Duke was about to say yes, but Leon screamed, drawing the attention of both of them. What was going on? Did Leon change his mind about marrying Ninian? What happened? The Duke probably wanted to attack his son and force him to shut up. But unfortunately, such a status person could only keep silent on the sidelines and listen to his son. Ninian was as surprised as the Herzogs. She didn't understand why Leon had suddenly changed his mind about marrying her, and tears began to well up in her eyes. Quietly trying to figure out what had happened, Herzog said, "Leon, hey, what's wrong?" However, he could not finish, because Leon said, "After I am of age, I would like to, and maybe let's have our wedding after I am of age." Obviously, Leon wanted to say something else, and Lucas clearly noticed it, because he broke off in the middle of his sentence. But without showing it, Lucas said, "I understand. Marriage at a young age is not the best idea in our time. You have a very serious and forward-thinking younger son, Duke." Okay, this time he managed to get away with it. But what happens if he can't next time? What if the lie is discovered? The Duke said, "Yes, thank you. I want to point out that my son is also worried about the princess." The girl gently pulled Leon to her, and then she looked me in the eye and said, "If you really did it for me, then thank you, Leon." In fact, he had no idea about the princess, but it was for the best that he was misunderstood. The coming-of-age ceremony should take place as soon as possible. In the Elheim family, only water abilities count, and Leon was convinced that he was the strongest in the duchy, so he would become the next ruler after his father, and then he could use his power to prevent Liatra from escaping. The next day, Liatra was standing in the hall, the same old hall on the other side of the estate. It's been a long time since she came here, and she has a lot of not-so-positive memories associated with this place. This was the disciplinary room where Herzog raised his children. Liatra hated this place, because it was here that she was hit in the face. She was always scared, and whenever she talked about this place, her heart would clench with pain and worry. Suddenly, the Duke burst into the room. He seemed to be very angry. What was making him so angry? He said, "Liat, at yesterday's banquet you danced with Burse. Do you want to explain your behavior to me?" Liatar turned indifferently to her father. As indifferently as possible, she said, "What would you like to hear from me? Why don't I have the right to dance with Burse?" The Duke froze in place like a stone statue, his body constrained by shock and incomprehension of what had become of Liatar. Something had changed in her, because Liatar had always been a shy child who constantly begged for at least a drop of attention. The Duke thought, "Come on, I don't believe she could have changed like that. It must be a new trick to attract attention." The man started shouting, "Don't you know I don't love Birsha? Don't try to get my attention. I won't fall for your tricks. I've never treated you as a member of the Elheim family or as a daughter either." Something broke, whether it was a branch outside the window or the bones that protected the heart. But Liatar will not allow herself to be manipulated like that anymore, never again. This is a new life, and new opportunities. She will not stay here forever. She raised her head and said, "Good, because I don't consider you my own father either." It was so clear and loud that it took a while for the Duke to realize what he had just heard. It was as if he had been robbed of the power of speech, and now something cracked in his body. The bones in his body were crumbling. He thought, "She couldn't have said that. She just couldn't. I don't believe it. Liatar always wanted to be part of the family and tried her best." It was painful to realize that she had lost all strength to fight to receive every drop of love, to deserve it. That's how everyone knew her, her parents, brothers, and others. The Duke said, "Do you realize what you're saying?" However, Liart did not deny her words at all. She said, "Yes, as you said earlier, I am not a member of the Elheim family, but for some reason I have to follow your rules and stay away from Birka. Isn't that objectionable?" She had a sly smile on her face, and she was definitely up to something. But Herzog didn't know what it was yet. The man was shocked, because he simply could not believe that his words were actually used against him, and later said, "Do you even realize what nonsense you are talking in this room?" This room was the perfect place to say everything she was thinking, because every time she came here, she listened to lectures until her ears hurt. It was the room of his mother, the Duke's wife, and a favorite place to play the piano with her 3 sons, An, Viamin, and Tandarion, by her side. The Duke said, "You killed your mother." Well, Liater heard this phrase throughout her life, and almost every day she felt guilty for killing the person she could have loved more than anyone else in the world. Of course, the grief for his wife was terrible, so much so that the man almost took his own life, but he had 4 children to raise. The Duke claimed that it was because Liater was born unawakened that his wife died. "My mother's condition was not the best after giving birth to 3 children, because it is simply impossible to bear a new life that literally kills you for so many years. But when she gave birth to Liater and Liana, that's when she passed away." The girl asked, "Did the mother ask for revenge against the child who killed her during childbirth?" It was hard to remember and realize that everything was not as Herzog expected. Liater was not that little and defenseless girl who needed attention. Now it was the other way around. The door slammed loudly behind him, leaving Herzog alone in the room, in the very room that used to be his most precious jewelry, better than diamonds, because his wife, was here. On the last day of her life, he recalled her saying, "We have a beautiful daughter, don't we? Love our children, dear." Her beautiful eyes and hair, everything was passed on to Liatra. She always reminded him of his mother. Out of anger, the man hit the piano and said, "No, she died because she gave birth to an unawakened one." For him, this child could never become part of the family. It was simply impossible. The Duke was sure that Liarte would never awaken the power. It would be as insignificant as it had always been. Liarte was making great progress in removing the curse, and every day she was getting better and better at it. Today, she finally removed all the remnants of the curse, the last layer that could not allow Mikkel to see fully. But now, everything is fine. The guy said, "Thank you, Liart, but is it just me? Or are you in a bad mood today? Did something happen?" Liatra said she went to the disciplinary room today, which surprised Mikhail. He quickly glanced at her, but did not notice any signs of beatings. So she had not been beaten, fortunately. But it was not polite to ask about it, because it could cause awkwardness between them. Mikhail smiled and said, "You didn't do so well at the ball either. Are you feeling bad? If you're tired, you can lean on me." The girl stared at him with a stony look, as if she was ignoring him again, but Liatra could understand. Not everyone is able to survive that. Suddenly, however, Mikhail noticed Liatra slowly approaching him and leaning on him, the soft feeling of security that Liatra had been longing to feel enveloping her from head to toe and making her smile. God, it was so uncomfortable and strange to feel a girl lying on top of you, making your heart beat faster. Mikhail held back his shame, but the joy of the situation overwhelmed him. Liatra said quietly, "In the room, I told Duke Elheim that I didn't consider him my father, or part of my family. Am I doing well?" Mikhail realized that for the first time in a long time, the girl was talking about what was in her heart, which was a very important sign of trust, and he appreciated it more than anything else. Gently hugging the girl in return, he said, "You're a good girl, Liatra. You shouldn't try for someone who doesn't appreciate you at all and doesn't consider you part of the family." Suddenly, Mikhail thought that if the girl spoke to her father like that, something was definitely going on in their family. So he asked, "By the way, Liat, can I ask what the Elheims did to you?" It was not an easy question, but Mikhail asked it for a reason, because the girl had betrayed her family by helping the enemy, and she had also heard stories about the disciplinary room. The guy gently grabbed her hand, not wanting to let go. Liatra said, "What did the Elheims do to me?" "Well, the most difficult memory is when I fainted in early childhood, and when I came to, I found myself near an unknown house in the mountains, all alone. These memories cast a horror over the girl's memory. She was so young, but no one wanted her anymore." Liatra continued, "I was given enough food, but I was always alone. It seems they just wanted to hide me from other people's eyes, but not kill me." Miko listened quietly as the girl told him. After a long time, they did take me away, but only to use me as a tool, for Lian to unleash his abilities. Without that reason, I would have lived my whole life up there on the mountain, all alone. At some point, she thought that maybe it would be better for her to stay in the mountains, even alone there. It would be much better than here. Liatra said, I was constantly scolded. It was very difficult to live here, in constant ridicule, anger, and indifference, so I tried my best to get their love, but I was only used. But now she was completely indifferent to everything connected with the Elheim family, because this family destroyed Liatra's soul, but now she has grown up and can decide for herself what to do. Suddenly, Mikkel said Liatra. His voice was shaking, but he managed to get the girl's attention. He hugged her so tightly that she was even shocked, because for the first time in her life, she felt someone sincerely and firmly hugging her. Such strange and pleasant sensations. She had never felt like this before. But why did the guy hug her after this story? It seemed as if he was going to cry out of pity, and from the realization of how terrible everything was and why Liatar wanted to leave the family, Michael said quietly, I will definitely free you from the Elheims. It was more than just a phrase, more than any promise. It turned into an unattainable life goal that might not have come true. Life might have turned out differently. But now Liatra believed in Mikhail, believed in herself and in her future, so pure and bright, wonderful and unforgettable. She squeezed his shirt tighter and pulled him close, saying, Thank you, Michael. Her voice trembling, but she was completely calm, Michael exuding calm and warmth. The guy pulled away and asked, Is there anything you'd like to do when you escape? Well, it looks like he wanted to fulfill another wish. The girl replied, I want to see the sea. I've always thought that it would be nice to see the sea at least once in my life before I die. Her words were so sincere that Liatra seemed to be about to cry. However, Mikkel grabbed her cheeks and said, Are you going to die, dummy? Even though he didn't know the whole story, this joke really made the girl laugh. The guy said, Do you want to see the sea? Then we will. I swear by the name of Burse, on the day you come of age, I will definitely take you to the sea. Meanwhile, the Duke and his son stood in front of the big door, knowing that today was the day of the meeting with the King of Spirits. The door opened easily, and a bright blue light was visible. Everyone quickly entered the room, and Lian was only trying to keep away from the spirit. The Duke thought, When I first heard about the awakening of the Spirit King, I could not imagine the extent of his power. This incredible power definitely belongs to the Spirit King. The Duke fell to one knee and said, King of the Spirits, we have brought you the true owner of the Spirit Stone. The Spirit King slowly flew up to Lian. It was obvious that he was worried, but the guy was absolutely sure that he was the keeper of the stone and the one who had been awakened. The spirit sighed heavily, and everyone tensed, feeling that something had gone wrong. The king said, And this is what you think could have woken me up? Everyone stared at him in shock, because no one could believe what the King of Spirits had just said. Suddenly, a powerful force began to spread throughout the room, destroying the stone statues. The spirit rose so high up the mountain that only its outline and situation were visible. It seems they made him very angry, so the spirit said, What an absurdity, it's not him. Everyone almost fainted, so who was awake? The spirit was so evil that it seemed it could destroy all living things here, and everything that exists beyond this world, because its hatred was boundless. He said, This creature could not have awakened me. You brought a fake. It's a lie. You lied to me. Die, all of you. At some point, everything shook. No one had the power that this spirit had in his hands. His eyes glowed white, and the water was literally burning around him. This spirit was capable of doing anything. The Duke shouted, We have no idea what you're talking about. We didn't lie to you. This is definitely the owner of the Spirit Stone. He's awakened. The spirit realized that these people did not even realize everything, the importance of the one he was waiting for. But the spirit also felt that somewhere not far away, somewhere very close, the reborn incarnation of Urin was reborn. The king came down and said, There is a true owner of the Spirit Stone in this manor. Bring him to me. The Duke got down on one knee and promised to bring the real owner of the stone. But his mind was filled with the question, if it wasn't Lian, then who could be the owner? Who could, if everyone in the family had already gained powers? Many people were brought to the king, but they were not the right people, so they were simply expelled. The Duke wondered where he could have gone wrong, where he had miscalculated, what he had done wrong, and why his son was not the owner of the Spirit Stone. Ain said, Just in case, we should check the younger awakened ones, and my father only agreed. Everyone could see how deeply Lian was in his thoughts. It seemed to really hurt him to hear that his abilities were someone else's, and that it was all just an illusion. Aang said, "Don't worry, Lian. If you are not the owner of the Spirit Stone, then anyway, you are the future Duke. I don't claim this place, so it is yours." Tandarian also had to come back, because his vocation was to protect the princess and help people, but definitely not to rule the whole duchy. Suddenly, one of the knights came running in and shouted, "Duke, Burse is going to leave!" It was strange for the man to hear this, because it seemed that Burse wanted to stay here for a long time. Lian immediately suspected something was amiss. He knew that something was definitely going on behind their backs. Something was bothering him. Birch's carriage was already waiting for its owner, and very soon the man came out of the mansion and headed for the carriage. Valto stood by the open door and said, "We still have time. Do we have to leave so early?" Well, Michael explained that the curse had already been lifted and that many things needed to be prepared, but Valto asked what exactly Michael wanted to prepare and whether he needed help with it. The man replied, "I'm getting ready to meet Liart." Suddenly, behind me, I heard a familiar voice say, Yes, you are leaving. I came to see you off, Michael Birch." And it sounded painfully familiar in Michael's ears. It was Leon. He was looking angrily at Mikhail. They both knew they had secrets, and each of them wanted Liart. Mikhail proudly raised his head and said, "What a great honor. Thanks to you, my journey will be calm, and thanks to the Elheim care, there was not a single boring day." Leon noticed that the boy was holding the same fox he had caught while hunting, and that fox was now associated with trouble. Leon looked at the fox, and then turned his gaze to Michael and asked, "Are you taking the fox with you as well?" Mikhail smiled. His charming charisma could not help but attract attention, and then the man said, "Of course, I always take my own with me." Leon knew that this phrase referred not only to the fox. He knew perfectly well that Mikhail was involved in affairs with Liater, but it was in his interest to prevent them from meeting again. Michael got into the carriage and left, saying that he was looking forward to seeing him again. But Leon replied, "Who knows? I don't think I'll see you again, and neither will my sister." Well, they went to war, and Liater was the prize in that war. Of course, it was only a matter of time for Mikhail, because he was convinced of his abilities and was sure that he would meet the Elheims more than once. As the days passed and weeks followed, Liater sat in her room waiting for her coming of age alone, several months having passed since her last meeting at the ball with Michael. Nothing changed, except that Leon changed the girl's room to another one. Well, it was the most ordinary room of an aristocrat. What more could you want? But the girl was still lonely, but now it was not a problem, rather a blessing. When the door opened, Liater said, "Why have you come again?" Her icy voice was like a dagger in my heart. Leon, who entered the room, only proudly replied, "Why do I need a reason to visit my own sister? A parade of hypocrites and nothing more." Well, Leon came to remind us that the coming-of-age parade is coming up, and as a very loving brother, he asked what Liart wanted for her celebration. But the girl replied, "It's your holiday. Why are you asking me what I want?" Leon walked up to his sister and looked down at her. His gaze was so arrogant. This guy was sure that he had all the power of the duchy in his hands. "Leon, how long can you look out the window like you're going to leave this place right now? I just can't stand it every time you do that. You want to run away from here? You'll never make it." The girl looked at his eyes full of anger. He was obsessed with revenge. He wanted her to suffer, but at the same time, he was ready to do anything for her. As he said goodbye, he said, "Even if you die, you will meet your death in the Duchy of Elheim." She had an unfair life. Liater clutched the blanket on her new bed. She believed in Michael, believed that he would free her from this nightmare. This time she believed that Leon was wrong, because now she was building her future, and this time she would definitely run away so far that no one else in her life would be able to control her life and would not find her. Ninian walked around the estate looking for Tandarian, shouting, "Tandarian, where are you? You've gone out again?" Suddenly, the guard appeared right in front of her eyes, and the princess was very frightened and almost hit her bodyguard on instinct. Ninian screamed, "I told you to stop hiding your records from me with magic. Where were you?" Tandarian replied with something beautiful and elegant, as befits a princess's bodyguard. But something else caught his attention, and he noticed something that hadn't previously aroused suspicion. The stranger who was walking next to Prince Lucas was looking around strangely. She looked scared and as if she was anxious. Was she hiding something? Ninian noticed that Tandarian was watching the stranger very closely, so she said, "Speaking of the new maid who arrived today." However, she did not have time to finish, because the man disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared. The new maid and Lucas were slowly walking down the dark staircase, and the girl suddenly said, "Your Majesty, the coming-of-age ceremony is just around the corner. By the way, Leon's coming of age was 3 days away, and it was almost the most important holiday in the entire Duchy of Elheim." Lucas quickly approached the door, which seemed to be beckoning him all along. It was incredible. A majestic lady, like the other half of the moon, floating in the atmosphere, releasing a dark force. It was the second half of the Spirit King, which was passed down in the emperor's families from generation to generation. There are 2 halves of the Spirit King, 1 queen and 1 king. Lucas said, "She is beautiful, as incredible as ever, Count Fidesz. I want to make her complete in fully possessing the power of the Spirit King." His eyes lit up with the idea, and the boy continued, "So that even the awakened ones could not influence the absolute imperial power." Well, the servant just nodded his head and agreed, not seeing any problem with it. The emperor asked for a bottle, and the servant got it and asked, "Do you want to collect it yourself today?" Lucas replied, "Have you forgotten about the powers of the imperial family? People with crimson eyes are not affected by the powers or curses of the awakened." The man moved the bottle closer to the Queen of Spirits, around which a black cloud of pollen, which contained the important power of imperial life, was hovering. Just 1 breath of this pollen is enough, and a living creature completely loses its mind. At some point, Lucas stopped and thought that this should be enough. They slowly began to walk back, and Lucas suddenly remembered the birch, to which the servant replied, "And the birch, they say he is still sitting quietly with his eyes closed." Well, the prince was quite satisfied with the result of his curse, because he knew that if the curse was not lifted, Bersha would remain blind forever. At this time, Tandarian was listening to everything, and his ability to hide the metering behind the power of water came in handy. It was clear that the prince was hiding another of the spirits, and we had to come up with a plan to expose the prince's black lies and prevent him from taking over the second part of the spirit. The day before the coming-of-age ceremony, Tandarian ran around the estate shouting, "Have you not found the owner of the spirit stone?" Well, Herzog admitted that whoever they brought to the Spirit King was not the right person, so it was just a failure and no result. Tandarian had come as if to see his brother come of age, but really to find out how things were going with the Spirit King. But it was good that everything was going smoothly. Tandarian did not feel such a powerful force from the Queen of Spirits. For some reason, it was more like a captivity in which the Queen surrendered. Leon asked, "Father, what do you plan to do when Leater comes of age?" A strange question, because Leon had never been interested in his sister. Ain thought the same thing, because he knew that no one had ever paid attention to Liatra before, but lately Leon seemed to be obsessed with her. The Duke replied, "If you can use your power without Liatra after you come of age, we will no longer need her and can throw her out of the family." However, Leon shouted as loudly as he could, "You can't!" This confused Herzog. Leon convinced his family that Leater should be kept to himself, but no one could understand why such a junk should be kept in the estate and why they should spend extra money. The Duke said, "But if she wants to leave the family when she becomes an adult, we cannot legally keep her here, she will be free." Leon had a plan to lock his sister up and not let her escape. Since childhood, he had been told that Leater belonged to him like a thing, and now she had rights? It was so humiliating. Ain tried to object, but he didn't have the courage to put in a word to defend Liatar. Tandarian suddenly shouted, "That's right, Leon. If Liarda disobeys, beat her well so that she can't run away on her own. Break the girl, then she won't stick her nose up. Do what you want, Leon." Were they still convinced that Leon was the owner of the stone, even though the Spirit King had denied it? Ain thought. The Spirit King called the Liana a fake, and when the other awakened ones were brought, he said it was not that, but he called only the Liana a fake. Slowly they began to realize. It was quite dark outside, almost nighttime, and Liatar stood outside breathing in the night chill, realizing that tomorrow was Leon's coming-of-age ceremony. By this point, she had to find out everything, because one way or another, Liatar knew that something was being hidden from her. She had to open a new door of truth, because this is a new future. She carefully and quickly came around the corner and ran to the door of the Spirit King. It was clear that all the awakened ones had been brought here for a long time, so something had definitely happened here, and only someone who was a descendant of the awakened ones could open the door. The girl was nervous, but when she pulled the handle, the door opened and she was blinded by a bright white light. Curiosity prevailed over fear, so Liatar gathered her thoughts and strength and set off into the unknown. Like a little child, she opened her eyes and looked at the one who was flying in the air. Liatar immediately felt the power, but it was not as powerful as it seemed to everyone else because she was in control of it herself and had enough strength to even resist the spirit. Liatra recognized this guy because he looked like the one who had revived her before she was reborn. Suddenly, he opened his eyes, his blue eyes like space, seeming painfully familiar, as if Liatra had seen them before. It was breathtaking to realize that the girl had seen him before, but now she was seeing him live. Suddenly, the serious spirit turned into a cute boy who smilingly held out his hands to the girl. And then he said, "At last you have come, my owner." His gentle voice was like a melody, so pleasant and familiar, something so calm that Liatra felt relieved. The spirit said, "You made a contract with me." But Liatra did not remember anything like that. She had not made any contract. She'd not even signed any documents in her entire life. So she said, "No, nothing like that happened. I don't remember." The spirit gently raised its palm to Liatra's hand and began to speak. A few seconds later, unknown symbols appeared on his arm, glowing brightly like a tattoo. It looked incredible, but it was also frightening, as if Liatra had been tattooed without her permission, and her father would have been angry about it. But the spirit said, "This is the sign you engraved on your soul, so that I can recognize you when you are reborn. We promised each other to meet again, Liat. You are the rebirth of the true owner of Urin." Oh my gosh, this information literally turns the world upside down, because Jurin was always just a legend that no one had ever seen or known. But now Liatra finds out that it's really true, and she's been reborn in the form of Jurin. But why her? Why didn't Lian become the owner of the Spirit Stone? Why was Liatra the one who was given this burden that will remain with her for the rest of her life? The spirit said, "Let me read your memories. I don't mind tearing apart all those bastards from this family. They don't know the real owner and are holding on to a fake one." Well, that was impressive, because it looks like those were Jurin's words when she was still on her record. The spirit said, "Liat, if you want, I can kill all the members of the Elheim family. I can wipe out the entire empire." However, the girl categorically refused to do so because she was not like the others. Liatra still remained true to her principles and did not want to betray them as a rebirth of Urin. These people were not worth anything, not even the slightest show of force. The girl said, "Tomorrow I will leave this place and keep our meeting a secret, please. I don't want anyone to know about it." The spirit smiled gently and asked, "Are you going to the Bircha?" Well, he already knew the answer, but Liatra's reaction made him laugh. Suddenly, the spirit said, "I would like to go with you, Liatra, but a long time ago, I divided myself into 2 parts and sealed them. If I leave, the seal will be destroyed." Oh my God. Every second that Liatra learned shocked her more and more. Suddenly she heard voices. Was it Herzog? She had to run away before it was too late. The spirit gently said, "When we meet again, I can't go with you, but be sure to be happy, Liatra." The girl smiled and hurried to the exit, and then hid behind the door of the room. The spirit knew that the entire Elheim family were just fools, because they would definitely regret it when they found out what they had done with their own hands. The day of the coming-of-age ceremony came, and it was a celebration not only for Liana, but also for Liatra, but it looked rather strange. Viamin said, "Even Liarte came to your ceremony." Lian replied, "Of course, we are twins. My ceremony is also a coming-of-age celebration for Liart." However, looking at Liarte again, a logical question arose as to why she needed 2 bodyguards, since she was not a criminal, but only a sister. "Well," Lian replied, "she often thinks about stupid things, so I thought it would be better if she was under guard." Even though Viamin didn't like Liart very much, he thought it was impossible to keep her here, especially since she was of age, and it was too much to handle, especially with a family. Lian said, "Family? Interesting thoughts, Viamin Elheim. Since when do you consider Liart part of our family?" It sounded horrible, but Liart would no longer be hurt if she knew about this conversation. Under pressure from his brother, Viamin could say nothing more than agree with his brother. When Viamin left, Lian looked at Liarda, who was standing somewhere near the wall with her head down, next to 2 guards. He said, "This is where you belong, Liarte. Stand in the shadows, longing for my light, for only I can give it to you." Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by Ninian, her gentle voice calling out to the boy, and Lian turned. The princess smiled and said, "Congratulations on your coming of age." Her bright facial expressions and sincere joy for the holiday warmed the soul, but not Liana's. The princess knew that they should bring up the wedding as soon as Lian became of age, so she was looking forward to the proposal. The girl was saying something, but Lian wasn't listening. His eyes were riveted on Liart, her hair, lips, and dress. This girl was perfect and terrifying at the same time. Liart remembered Mikkel's words that he would come to her when she was of age and free her, take her to the sea, and she believed him and hoped that he would keep his word. Meanwhile, the Duke was laughing, surrounded by his guests, until a servant shouted, "Duke, there's an uninvited carriage!" Everyone immediately turned to the Duke, waiting for another guest, who could have come to the Elheim estate so boldly and uninvited. A man entered the hall, his footsteps slowly attracting the attention of the people. "Do you look familiar, Valto and Mikael?" Mikael smiled and said, "Thank God the banquet is not over yet. I was afraid I would be late." The imperial family opened their mouths when they saw Michael. Not only did this man show up at the banquet uninvited, so Michael appeared without a bandage, which could only mean one thing. Mikael managed to break the curse, managed to destroy the layers of the curse and restore his vision, Lucas thought. No bandage? Who is this awakened one who decided to help him? The Duke shouted as loudly as he could, "Michael Birch, how dare you enter the Elheim estate without an invitation? You will surely answer for your actions." However, Michael looked very calm and replied, "Excuse me, but I came for what I left behind." Everyone was surprised to see what the man meant. His gaze slowly moved to Liart, and the girl almost fainted. She had been completely alone in this house for several months, since their last day together, but he had not forgotten. Mikael stretched out his hand and said, "I have come to keep my promise, Liarte. Come with me to the Duchy of Bircha." His gaze was like a salvation from this hell of anger and hatred. He was the ray of light that she wanted to see so much, and now she was the happiest in the world. Mikael had really arrived. He really smiled at her and looked at her, at no one else. Only Liarta was the center of his attention, only her. Michael slowly stepped forward and began to speak. But suddenly, a wave of water appeared between them, powerful and strong, like the embodiment of anger and hatred, and it was clear who caused this wave. "It was Leon," he said. "Who said you could take her away?" Everyone still thought he was the only one awake, except for his family, so people started to panic a little bit, but they couldn't do anything about it. He raised his hand up and gathered all his emotions together, and then combined them with force, saying, "How dare you take what belongs to me? Die!" The water turned into blades that flew across the room at breakneck speed, trying to kill Michael. However, the man did not argue. He did not try to do anything or save himself. He knew he would live. On shouted, "No! Liat!" But his words would have done nothing in this situation. Everyone saw how the water covered Liarte and Mikael, as if to hide them from other eyes. But suddenly, the blades dissolved. They became a calm wave of water controlled by someone else. On shouted, "Whose power is this?" The whole room was filled with a powerful force that gave way only to the power of the spirit. Everyone felt their bodies weaken in comparison to the power that was in the room. Leon realized that his power was simply pushed away and said quietly, "Is she?" But he could not finish the sentence. After all, everyone was shocked to see the power that had just belonged to Leon flying around Liart. Liarte said, "Behave yourself around the guests of Leon Ricius." Her voice was so serious and bold. The guy was angry, because his guesses were eventually confirmed, and this did not make him happy at all, because it was clear that the little bubble of reality was simply collapsing. Mikael loved watching this, his proud look maintaining his dignity. Leater had protected him, which meant she cared about him. Leater clenched her hands into fists and walked to the middle of the hall. Mikael grabbed the girl's hand and said, "Liatra, stop! Where are you going?" It was strange to watch the girl who wanted to run away so badly, now just walk into the center of anger and hatred. But the girl replied, "I have to do something before I leave." She slowly let go of Mikael's gentle hand, but the boy trusted her, even though they hadn't known each other for long, and weren't that close. He felt that she wouldn't betray or deceive him. All eyes were on the girl. Leater was proudly walking along the path, straight to the center. At some point, she reached the Duke, and the man said in surprise, "Liat, this power!" But he could not finish. It was such a shocking phenomenon. This situation was very complicated. It was difficult to understand anything at all. They had been convinced of one thing all their lives, but in reality, it turned out to be something completely different. Liatra said, "Your Grace, Duke of Elheim, from this moment on, I am severing all ties with the family and the Duchy of Elheim. I have reached the age of majority, and you have no right to keep me." She quickly turned around, and memories immediately came flooding back. For 21 years, including the time before she was reborn, she lived in this hell, where she was humiliated and put in no position. She was like a commodity in the hands of buyers, useless to anyone. But now it's over. Everything will be completely different. Leater will no longer be someone's thing. She will build her own life and her own future, and no one will be able to tell her anything anymore. Leader turned to the boy and said, "I think that's it. Let's go, Michael." Her gentle smile had already charmed him since their first meeting. He looked at her with admiration, as if she were a diamond he had found in a haystack, now more valuable than anything else in the world. Mikkel took the girl's hand, and they both left the mansion. The light that hid them was so bright that people closed their eyes. Very soon she will see the sea. Her shining eyes were so wonderful. This life is gaining new momentum, and now everything seems radically different. Mikkel and Liatra were riding in a carriage in the woods, and the man thought, "Those bastards grabbed onto her to the last, didn't want to let her go, even though they had been oppressing her all her life." According to memoirs, the Duke was literally ready to fall on his knees in front of his daughter, to do anything to keep this power in the Elheim family, to swap Liana and Liarta, anything. But they just didn't understand how valuable Liart was. They didn't deserve her. They didn't deserve even a glance from her. It was terrible and thoughtless, and may they regret it for the rest of their adult lives. After all, Liart is not an accessory or a source of energy for this bastard. She is a separate person who has the right to live and the right to be happy. Liarta quietly said, "I can't believe it. It's amazing. I left the Duchy of Elheim. It really happened." The man gently ran his finger along the girl's cheek. Liart had never felt this before. She had never been in a relationship and had never even thought about it. But why was this strange feeling restraining her? Michael said, "I will help you forget everything you experienced in this place. I will always be there for you." Next to him, Liarte felt a peace that she could not afford before, one that had always been forbidden, one that she could not even dream of. Suddenly the driver said, "Younger sir, we have arrived." Well, they finally arrived in Liarta and could see the sea for the first time in their lives. Mikkel smiled and said, "Liarte, are you ready?" His bright smile was so happy that Liarte couldn't help but smile back. Although she suspected something was wrong, she was looking forward to the sea. The door opened slowly. Something new was waiting for her. Liarte felt her delight beyond words, and for the first time in her life, she did not have enough words to describe what she saw. The sea, so beautiful and calm, the dream of a lifetime, had finally come true. It was so incredible that it still seemed like a dream. Liart was so happy that she could not look away. The sea was beautiful, as was Liart herself, the water. This water was so clean and clear, so calm and quiet, it seemed that the girl could sit here forever. There were already many stars in the sky, and the night was quiet, but Liart was still enthusiastically watching the waves that were thrown ashore and then taken back. The moonlit water looked even more magical than anything else in the world, and Liarta stared at it all day long, unable to look away for a second. Suddenly, Mikkel came up behind me and said, "The sun has already risen, Liarta. Did you like the sea so much?" For the first time in a long time, the girl heard his voice and replied, "I really liked it. It's much bigger and more beautiful than in the pictures from fairy tales. Thank you, Michael. I'm glad I met you." Her eyes were like the water in the sea. This girl was magical. Mikkel was beginning to realize it. He had realized it from the first meeting. But now something had changed in his life, something significant and unusual. The guy felt a shiver run through his body. It was the first time he had ever heard a girl give him such a compliment. Was she really happy to meet him? Well, it caused a lot of emotions in Michael. He scratched the top of his head awkwardly and said, "Please take care of me like this in the duchy." His shy look was so cute. Even though they were old enough, they were like little children, shy of each other. Liart continued to gaze with admiration at the sea, as magical and incredible as she had imagined it to be. Mikkel slowly approached from behind. His tall physique reflected as a shadow on the ground. Liart's fascinated gaze was now on Michaela. Their gazes crossed. They were both embarrassed to look, but something pulled at them, beckoned. Mikkel said quietly, "You have no idea how much I missed you, Liarta. Can we always be together?" His gentle hands took Liart's hand, and now she could feel the heat that enveloped Michael from head to toe. The man continued, "And someday we'll go to the sea again." He put his hand to her cheek, so warm and gentle, really like a little child. Meanwhile, Leon was sitting in his chambers. His belongings were scattered all over the room, chairs and vases, rockers, flowers. Everything that could be thrown was on the floor. He wondered, where did I miscalculate? That's right. The problem was with him from the very beginning. The story doesn't end there. It only begins, because now the Elheim family knows that Liarta has a powerful power, and they have many questions that only the Spirit King can answer.